Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel, guys. So what we're going to be doing today we're going to be rounding up all the results from the weekend of football, guys. So obviously we are going to be talking about the championship today, guys, and it's been a pretty full-on week for the first week of the championship, if I say so myself, guys. But just before we do actually get into this video, I will put your comments on the screen now. So if you did get any of the predictions right, I'll put them around the screen now, and fair play to everyone who did actually get a prediction right. So I'll leave them all around the screen now so you guys can see them. And I actually only got one prediction right, so I was in the right scoreline. I actually only got one of them right. That was Huddersfield against Brentford. I predicted 2-1 and it finished 2-1, so I got one of them right. So probably not the best for me, but it's not too bad. So what we are going to be doing in this video, guys, we're going to be going over each individual score and basically going over them and doing a little bit of an analysis on them and basically seeing what we can learn from this. I mean, I don't think you can read too much into this, as we've only played one game of the season. You know, we've still got 45 games left. However, what I want you to do is comment in the comments down below, how did your team play at the weekend and what did you make of them? Do you think there's good things going on? Do you think there's signs of good things still yet to come at your clubs? Or are you a little bit concerned now? So let me know in the comments down below. I'd be very interested to know. So the first thing we have to talk about is, of course, Fulham versus Newcastle. In this game, Matt Smith popped up with the only goal to give Fulham a 1-0 victory. I think in this game, Newcastle did have quite a few penalty appeals, which were all waved away. However, in the game itself, they just didn't do enough to score, in my opinion. They had a couple of chances. Dwight Gale had quite a few chances. I think Richie had a couple of chances here and there. But one player that did actually impress me for Fulham was their new inquisition in goal, being David Burton. Obviously, he arrived from Brentford, and he's actually impressed me. He did well in that match. And when I watched him last season when Preston played Brentford, he made a terrific save. He made one outstanding save, which is just stuck in my memory. And I watched a bit of the match on Friday night, and he actually did impress me. He made some couple of good saves, and I think he'll be a good buy for Fulham, in all honesty. And fair play to Fulham, because I had sort of wrote them off at the start of the season in my championship predictions video. I said that they were going to struggle this season, and in all honesty, they could still struggle, considering they have now lost Ross McCormack. But Matt Smith's done well to get off the goal sheet early on in this season. The next game is then Birmingham against Cardiff. This one actually ended 0-0, which in all honesty I wasn't too surprised with. I predicted a 1-0 win to Cardiff, so I was around about the right region with this one, really. I knew it would be a low-scoring game, and in the end that was actually how it turned out to be. Both goalkeepers seem to be on good form today, and a draw was probably the right result in this game, and neither team could really capitalise to break through, so a draw probably was the right result in the end. So Birmingham and Cardiff fans, what do you think your season has to come? I'd be very interested to know. And then the next game is Blackburn against Norwich. So this one was absolutely mental, guys. It managed to finish 4-1 to Norwich in the end. Obviously, this was played at Ewood Park, so for Norwich to kick off the season with a 4-1 win is a fantastic start for them. But Blackburn Rovers, what did you make of this performance, guys? Because I'd actually be very interested to hear from some Blackburn fans, because honestly, I think you really could be in trouble this season. I mean, I think it has to be said, I think a couple of people may be overreacting to this result, because obviously Norwich, they probably are one of the favourites to go up this season. A lot of people are tipping them for promotion, so it's no surprise really that Norwich did walk away with a victory. However, what I'd be concerned with if I was a Blackburn fan was the manner in which Norwich were able to complete this victory, because Blackburn's defenders, they just seem so passive. I didn't watch the game myself, however, I saw extended highlights of the match, but every time Norwich seemed to go forward, it was just like a knife through butter. The defenders were so passive in this match, and no one was like putting their body in or getting in the way of a shot or anything like that. There was no real passion or commitment from this Blackburn side, and honestly, it could be a concerning one. Obviously, Owen Coyle being new to the manager's job, I think a lot of Blackburn fans were unsure really of this appointment when it first came about, so I'd be very interested to know, Blackburn fans, what do you think this season holds for you? Do you think you'll be able to bounce back from this or not? And Norwich really is it's not really a pretty funny team with Norwich really, because then they don't really have what it takes to cut it in the Premier League. However, every time they seem to come back down to the Championship, they always seem to storm the league and do really well in it. Honestly, it could be a very interesting season for Norwich and Blackburn as well, for opposite reasons. The next game is then Bristol City against Wigan. So this one actually managed to finish 2-1 to Bristol City in the end, guys. And this one was actually quite an interesting one. Wigan took the lead in the first half, but in the end, a late winner from Bristol City meant that they were able to snatch up all 3 points. So if I was a Wigan fan, I wouldn't read too much into that if I was being completely honest. I mean, it's the first day of the season. You've come into a new league, obviously, being promoted last season, and in all honesty, Wigan were probably quite unlucky not to get anything from this match, considering how late they actually managed to hold on for. However, looking from it from a Bristol City perspective, I think there's a lot of positives to take from this game, and some of their new signings obviously started in this game today. I think a couple of them look to be very good acquisitions for their squad, and as well thought they showed character to come back from a 1-0 down to winning 2-1 very late on in the match. I think Lee Johnson, their manager, he's got a plan for this Bristol side. I think they're going in the right direction, so it'll be a good one this season for Bristol City, I think. The next game is then Derby against Brighton, so this one actually finished 0-0 in the end. And for all the attacking prowess that both these sides possess, it actually finished goalless in the end, and it was probably an even result, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, David Stockdale had a fantastic game for Brighton. I saw the highlights. He made some terrific saves for them, but honestly, I think a draw was probably the right result in the end. I looked at the stats at the end of this game, and they were very similar. You know, possession was very similar, shots on target was very, very similar, and corners and all that sort of stuff. It was very similar indeed, so I think a draw was probably the right result for this in the end. And I think considering this start, there'll be no doubt in my mind that come the end of the season, both these sides will be battling it out at the top of the table, so it'll be interesting to see who will actually finish high this season, whether it will be Derby or Brighton. So what do you guys think? Who will finish higher this season, Derby or Brighton? Let me know in the comments down below. And then the next game is Huddersfield against Brentford. So this one finished 2-1 to Huddersfield, and this was the only game where I correctly guessed the scoreline. So I actually guessed it would be 2-1 to Huddersfield, and in the end it actually was that. And obviously two of Huddersfield's new signings managed to get on the score sheet, so a very encouraging start from them indeed. And at the start of the season, I actually tipped Huddersfield to be a dark horse this season, and that was demonstrated today. You know, Brentford are no easy side to go up against, and to get a 2-1 victory against them is a very encouraging start for Huddersfield. So this will give them a platform to build on, and you can't really ask for much more than getting 3 points at the start of the season. In terms of Brentford, I think that in all honesty, they probably could do with a couple more additions to that squad. I think it may be looking a bit weak in a couple of areas. I think that maybe a couple wingers wouldn't go amiss for Brentford, but apart from that, I wouldn't read too much into this result really. It'll be interesting to see if Brentford can bounce back next week in their home fixture. And then the next game is Ipswich against Barnsley. This one was an absolutely mental match, and it actually finished 4-2 to Ipswich in the end. An absolutely crazy game, and Grant Ward, what a debut he had for Ipswich. Absolutely insane to get a hat-trick on your debut when you're that young. Absolutely incredible from him. And if that's Ipswich showing what's to come for the rest of this season, it could be a very interesting one for them. I've got to be honest, I was quite concerned about Ipswich going into the start of this season, really. I was unsure about the signings they've made, if I'm being completely honest, and I thought that, in all honesty, they were going to stagnate down the table, if I'm being completely honest, but from the showing on the first day of the season, that's obviously not going to be the case this year, as they did manage to score 4 goals in the end, albeit it was against a newly promoted Barnsley side, so in that aspect, I don't think Ipswich fans should get too carried away with this result, but you can't really argue with winning 4-2 on the opening day of the season. Then in terms of Barnsley, I thought they did alright, really, on their first game of the season. Going away to Ipswich is never an easy feat, and they actually did well to score 2 goals in the end. Tom Bradshaw was very unlucky that he didn't get a goal in his debut. He had a very good chance, but the goalkeeper managed to make a good save. But to get 2 goals going away to Ipswich, that's not too bad in all honesty. Obviously, Conor Hourihane managed to score for them. He looks to be a very decent player at the Championship level. So if I was a Barnsley fan, I wouldn't be too concerned by this start, if I'm being honest. I think there's more positives to take from this, even though it was a defeat on the first day. And then the next game being probably the game of the weekend, really. Nottingham Forest 4, Burton Albion 3. What a game this was. And if I'm being completely honest, this caught me completely off guard. I was not expecting this from Burton Albion. Obviously, they do have Nigel Clough as a manager, and he's got them very well set up. Obviously, he knows the Championship as a league, and that showed with this Burton display today, guys. I think in terms of Burton, Dyer looks to be a very good addition. He looked very deadly throughout the game. Obviously, he did actually get a goal. Obviously, they did concede 4 goals, which has to be a downside for them. You know, when you go away from home, you score 3 goals. Really, you expect to be winning that match, and I think it will be a concern. Burton this season, perhaps defensively, but going forward, they look absolutely fantastic, and it completely caught me off guard, if I'm being completely honest. Nottingham Forest, this is a really strange one with Forest, because even after the first game of the season, I've still got no clue as to where they're going to finish, in my opinion, because going forward, they looked excellent. Obviously, Assombalonga managed to get 2 goals. He looks to be on fire this season. Obviously, yeah, Lamb scored as well. I think it was Burke as well scored for them. So going forward, they look incredibly potent going forward. However, at the back, some of their defending was abysmal at times for Nottingham Forest. So I really can't call where I think Forest will finish, because at one end of the pitch, they look fantastic, and at the other, they look incredibly shaky. So it'll be interesting to see actually where they actually finish up at the end of the season. So Nottingham Forest fans, where do you think you'll finish at the end of this season? And what do you think you can learn from this first game? Same for Burton as well. And then here it comes, guys. The one that probably a lot of you will have been looking forward to. Reading 1, Preston North End 0. Obviously, if you don't know, I do support Preston North End. Oh, where do I even start with this one? I don't even know. Obviously, In this game, I think the only thing that I need to say to sum up this game was that Reading had 71% possession. Oh my word. In the first half, Preston were absolutely atrocious and we couldn't get a foothold in this game. I think what just didn't work for us today was that we played a 3-5-2. That's not the issue, but it was the players we employed into this 3-5-2 system. The three centre mids that we had playing were all very attacking and forward-thinking players, and then the two wing-backs we had Greg Cunningham on one side, and on the other side we had Liam Grimshaw, who had a nightmare of a debut. Obviously, he is actually normally a defensive mid, and so it didn't help that he was forced to play out of position, really. And then in the second half, we actually had our captain, Tom Clark. He had to go off the pitch with a hamstring strain. So it definitely wasn't an encouraging start for Preston at the start of the season. And I'm just hoping that we'll be able to bounce back from a very lackluster start. But in terms of Reading themselves, I'm not taking anything away from Reading because they're absolutely fantastic. I listened to this game on the radio and some of their passing was absolutely fantastic. They had a foothold in the game from minute one, and all their players seem to be buying into this system that Jaap Stan's employed. Obviously, a 4-3-3 system that worked very well for them against our 3-5-2, and honestly, we couldn't get anywhere near them, really. And obviously, John Swift scored on his Reading debut, so he looks to be a good buy for Reading, as do a couple of other their players as well, but 1-0, really, it flattered Preston, really. The next game is then Rotherham against Wolves. This one was actually a very good game as well. It actually finished 2-2 in the end. Obviously, Rotherham did actually manage to go up with a 2-0 lead, so from the aspect, Rotherham will probably be quite disappointed, really, and I actually did predict a draw for this game. However, I predicted that it would be a 1-1 draw, so to finish 2-2 in the end, I wasn't too far off the boil. I think what Rotherham will be really disappointed with obviously, they did have the 2-0 lead, but apart from that as well, Wolves were also down to 10 men. However, they still managed to get into this game. I think from a Wolves perspective, you can't really read too much into this game, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, they've got a new manager who's only been in charge for about 4 days before this game's taken place, so I don't think you can really read too much into this. However, they did do well and show good character to come back in from 2-0 down up to 2-2. So Rotherham as well, I was quite impressed with it. I think in the first half they showed what they could do this season. A lot of people are tipping them for relegation, myself included, but if they showed more of what they showed in the first half, they could be safe this season. And then QPR against Leeds, guys. This one was a mental match. This one finished 3-0 to QPR. Obviously, this did take place on Sunday afternoon, and fair play to QPR. You know, I was concerned in my championship predictions video that QPR aren't going to have enough going forward this season, and they're probably going to struggle for goals. However, I was completely proven wrong. I made to eat my words today, really, with QPR scoring 3 against a pretty decent looking Leeds backline, if I may say so. And I must say as well that Poulter looked very good going forward. He managed to do his business up front. Obviously, he's a big unit and he did what he needed to do, really. And I mean, I said in my championship predictions video as well, I thought that Gary Monk, despite how good of a manager he is, and I really do rate Gary Monk as a manager, I said that it'll still take a couple of seasons to turn around this Leeds side, despite some of the positive signings that they've brought. And then the last game was Sheffield Wednesday against Aston Villa, and this one actually managed to finish 1-0 in the end to Sheffield Wednesday. It was a late Forestieri goal, which managed to wrap things up for Sheffield Wednesday, and in all honesty, I think it was Aston Villa, really, who had the limelight of possession in this match. They probably had the better chances as well, and in all honesty, Aston Villa should be pretty disappointed, really, if I say so. All the quality that they've got going forward, you know, they got players like Jordan Ayew, they got obviously Ross McCormack coming in now. They just couldn't break through this Sheffield Wednesday defence, and honestly, Ross McCormack probably should have had a goal. I think a couple of other players should have had a goal as well for Aston Villa, but they made one mistake right at the end, and that just led Forestieri to going in. So in my championship predictions video, I actually said that Sheffield Wednesday will be going up this season. I predicted them to finish in 2nd, and I predicted Aston Villa to come in 6th place. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually comes true. So let me know in the comments down below if you support Aston Villa or Sheffield Wednesday. What do you think of the game on the first day of the season, and what do you think of Ross McCormack and Forestieri and their first performance of the season? So guys, that will now wrap it up for this championship roundup video, guys. So if you have enjoyed, make sure you do smash a like on this video and leave in the comments down below what did you think of your team's performance in the comments down below. I'd be very interested to know, and where do you think you can go from here. But like I said, guys, that will wrap it up for this video. So if you have enjoyed, make sure you do leave a like. It really does help me out. Also, subscribe around here for regular championship content. Your support on all my videos lately has been phenomenal, so if we do keep that up, that would be insane, guys. But like I said, make sure you follow me on Twitter as well. I always tweet before I upload a video, therefore you'll never miss a video ever again, guys. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.